on the life of George Whitefield. And what a book! What an amazing book! I read it a few days ago. Really enjoyed it. For those, I've been able to contact people on WhatsApp on my other phone. This is my other phone. But data's run out today, so my wife's going getting some data. So those who contacted me on WhatsApp, I keep contacting, then I don't contact you. The reason is that to get data around here, we're in the bush, so we have to go into town to get Vodafone and stuff like that. So she'll be here later on this afternoon, my wife. She's just doing some shopping. So I will be in contact with those on WhatsApp again later today. So God bless you. Yeah, this book, fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Would recommend you to get it. I've recommended it before. Michael A.G.J. Haken, George Whitefield, published by Evangelical Press. A couple of things that came out. His humble beginnings. He was born in Gloucester, 1714. He went to Oxford University in 1732, and there he met John and Charles Wesley, the Holy Club, and where they met for prayer. And right about 1735 he was converted. And right about 1736, June 20th, he was ordained a deacon, and 27th of June preached his first sermon. In 1738 he did his first voyage to America and did ministry in the southern colonies, and then in December he voyaged home to England. In 1739 he was ordained priest in Church of England. In 1739, on February 17th, he began open-air preaching. George Whitefield started street preaching in a time when the Church of England was in much moral decay. Many of the bishops were not bothered about preaching the gospel or standing up for the faith. There was a steep decline because in the 1600s, way before Whitefield, the Church of England kicked out 2,000 Puritan ministers, and this left the Church of England in a bad way spiritually. But also, you had problems in the dissenters, the Presbyterians. About 1,000 ministers that left the Church of England became English Presbyterian, and it's a sad fact that by the time George Whitefield was street preaching, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, and Congregationalists were not strong spiritually. They were not firing out the gospel as they should do, and it was very weak. Gin was sold by the ton in London. There was a gin shop on every corner. There was homosexuality. There was immorality rife. It was a really sad state of affairs. And so at this point, George Whitefield is raised up by God, and he was a firebrand, blazed the gospel. And there are stories where he was preaching at the colliers, where miners were listening, and tears would come down their eyes. I think David Hume heard him preach and was impressed. David Hume being a philosopher. There were many literary people who were high in society, who were famous writers, went to hear Whitefield and were impressed by his preaching. Such was his eloquence and power, pulpit power and preaching of the gospel. He met Jonathan Edwards in 1740, in October 1722. There was so many people getting converted, thousands of people coming to hear him preach both in America and in the UK, up to 20 to 30,000 people. And that's no exaggeration. There are people who have done PhD studies on the statistics and have verified that it's true that there were up to 20, 30,000 people coming to listen to George Whitefield. There were opposition to his preaching. There were the Erskine brothers in Scotland felt that he was preaching assurance before salvation. In other words, they were saying that you can have an assurance before you even really fully understand the gospel. Um, but Whitefield acknowledged in years later that he was a bit unwise in some of the things that he said, but still God used his preaching in a powerful way. He had a massive controversy with John Wesley on Calvinism and Arminianism. God bless you. We're okay, bro. We're okay. And there was this big controversy between Calvinism and Arminianism of John Wesley. John Wesley wasn't the same Arminian as Jacob Arminius. I think Wesley's Arminianism was a little bit different from Jacob Arminius. But also Whitefield had an issue with John Wesley's teaching on perfectionism. John Wesley said that you could have sinless perfection, that you could reach. Hey, God bless you, Ryan. God bless you, bro. So John Wesley taught that you could have sinless perfection, and there were people going around saying they'd not sinned for weeks or months. And Whitefield challenged this and said this was not biblical. And I think Charles Wesley, later on in years to come, came to a more balanced position than his brother John Wesley. That's just some basic information there. Whitefield got married, and he had a son born in 1743, October 4th. Buried his son in 1744, February the 8th. He was attacked often for preaching, and he was attacked and almost murdered in Plymouth in 1744, June 26. He did his third voyage to America in 1744, August to October. In 1744 to 1748, he did ministry in America, and then 1748 to March, he left America for Bermuda. In March 15th, he reached Bermuda and began to stay of about 2 months. He did his second visit to Ireland in 1751 in May, and visited fifth time to Scotland in July of that year. In 1751, August to November, he did his fourth voyage to America. So his preaching was prolific. He was all over the place, back to America, back to UK. His marriage was not a happy marriage. His marriage didn't go well, which is a tragedy, really. But a man who was preaching so much like that, the marriage isn't going to go well, is it? If he's away from home so much. Whitefield preached in his preaching. He homed in on two major doctrines. One doctrine was justification by faith. He often preached this wherever he went, and also the doctrine of regeneration, that you must be born again. He preached these two doctrines all very, very often. Like they were the most things that he preached on. The other thing that he preached on as well is holiness. There was a lot of antinomianism growing within the country, and it had been growing for quite some time, actually, since the 1600s. There was quite many hundreds, if not thousands, of ministers in the 1600s believing in antinomianism, and they had a massive battle with the Westminster Divines on it. But anyhow, in Whitefield's time, antinomianism was spreading. Antinomianism is the idea that you're saved by grace, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're covered by grace. Whitfield's hymnal, I'm okay, Ryan, thanks, bro. You could send it me on PDF if you wanted to. That'd be very interesting. But anyhow, I forgot what I was saying then, Ryan. What was I saying? I'm getting the Joe Biden effect. What was I saying? I'm trying to think what I was saying now, Ryan. I appreciate the hymn book, but it's just stopped me in my flow. Yeah, antinomianism. It was spreading like wildfire in the colonies of America and in UK. And antinomianism is the idea that you're saved by grace, but you can live the way ever you want. So Whitefield, in his preaching, had a fine balance. He preached justification by faith, and he preached that often, and regeneration. But he also preached the importance of holiness, striving for holiness, pressing on for holiness. And so there was a fine balance in his preaching there to offset the antinomianism of the time and the sinless perfection of Wesley. So my overall impression that Whitefield was just dedicated to the glory of God. That was his zeal. That's what motivated him. That's what it was, the glory of God. So my friends, I would encourage you to get hold of this biography, Michael A.G. Haken, George Whitefield. And there's also, if you want to do the big read, just wait there. So if you want to do the big read, there's the 2-volume Whitefield here by Arnold Dallimore, published by the Banner of Truth. I'd encourage you to read these. They'll encourage you and strengthen you in the faith. So there's 2 volumes there. Arnold Dallimore. Yeah. But I would start off with this Haken one by Evangelical Press, Professor of Church History, Biblical Spirituality, Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Louisville, Kentucky, Evangelical Press. Yeah, so I'd encourage you there. And here is Whitefield and the Wesleys at the Holy Club in Oxford. And that's them, Whitefield, Wesley, and the Wesleys at the Holy Club in Oxford. So we have the George Whitefield Library here. I've called it George Whitefield Library, so pray that it would be used by the university students in Accra, in Winnipeg. So yeah, so that's the 2 volumes. It's interesting that the history of these 2 volumes, the history of these 2 volumes is very interesting because Whitefield was absolutely famous in his day. In fact, he was so famous that in America, the American people saw George Whitefield as their champion. That's how famous he was. But when he died, he's kind of, there was a kind of like, some people kind of regarded him as some kind of saint, like the Catholic thing. And when he was buried in his tomb, someone stole his hand, his shoulder and hand, his arm, one of his arms. And they kept it for many, many, many years, and then eventually they sent it back by post. So there was this kind of veneration, but eventually the name of Whitefield died out, and he was in obscurity. And people remember the revival because of John Wesley and Charles Wesley. But it was only until Dallimore's biography, this 2-volume biography, that reinstated George Whitefield on the historical map. So now, right across the world, many, many people now appreciate George Whitefield for who he is and what he did, whereas maybe 100 years ago he'd been forgotten. He was a Calvinist, and he was a powerful evangelistic preacher, and so I'd encourage you to read all about him. You'll be inspired, and that is the key. These little biographies do. Stephen Lawson has done some for them, I think on Spurgeon and 1 or 2 others. These are superb little biographies. I'd encourage you to order them and read them. There's a whole batch of them. They're really nice, beautiful nugget biographies. They're really spiritually edifying and well researched as well. Even though they're small, it's compact with a lot of research in here. He also homes in on the Baptist here. Aiken is a Baptist, so he likes to mention about the Baptist. He mentions that the English Baptists were not too keen about George Whitefield. They thought his theology was a little bit wonky, that he was a bit wonky-do, you know. And the other thing as well is in America, the Baptists embraced him more. So those who were Baptists, I thought you might be interested in that. Excellent biography, spiritually powerful and edifying biography, very informative about the history of the times. Excellent, one of the best biographies I've read. He's done Aiken, Dr. Michael Aiken has done a superb job with that. So I'd encourage you to read this first. Then when you've done that, start on Whitefield's biography by Arnold Dalmore, 2 volumes. And then Whitefield has done a journal, and you can get his edited journal by Banner of Truth. That is a powerful tool to read. It's really, really powerful. And then you've got his sermons, Whitefield's sermons and letters, as my friend has said. So God bless you, Ryan. God bless you, everybody. I'm going to go. I hope this was an encouragement to you. On my other phone today, I'll be in touch with people on WhatsApp and Skype. God bless you and take care. God bless you.